This film, which was a blacklist script by a writer named Greg Johnson, just spoke to me. I mean, you talk about kind of the world being what it is, and my cinematic viewpoint being a dark lens. The story just took me in right away.
Hey folks, Brian Smith here with DreamPath Podcast, where we get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. Today we talk to screenwriter and film director Tim Sutton. Tim has written and directed 5 critically acclaimed feature films, including Memphis, Pavilion, Dark Knight, Donnybrook, and Funny Face. His most recent film is The Last Son. Based on a blacklist script by Greg Johnson, The Last Son stars Sam Worthington of Avatar fame, Heather Graham of Boogie Nights fame and many other great films, and Machine Gun Kelly. This is a Western, and it really stays true to the genre. I love Westerns, so it was fun to dive into this film and see what Tim decided to do with it as a director. The subject matter is extremely, extremely dark, but it is juxtaposed against a beautifully shot movie in Montana. Lots of natural light, gorgeous scenery. The dark subject matter is this, and here's the plot. Sam Worthington's character is searching for and hunting down and killing his own children. Why? He believes he is cursed and that the curse will cause his own children to kill him unless he kills them first. So, very original plot, but it's a really nice fit in the Western genre. In this chat, Tim and I talk about how he approaches writing space and pauses, or aggressively long takes, as he puts it, in his screenplays. He also talks about the challenges of being an indie filmmaker while you're trying to stay true to your vision, yet appeal to financial folks, the people that are going to be investing in the film. We talk about his previous films, Funny Face and Donnybrook, both of which I watched before the interview. And we also talk about some of the common denominators or through lines that run through a lot of his films. Tim had a lot of wisdom to impart as a filmmaker, a screenwriter, and as a creative. So let's jump into my chat with Tim Sutton. Tim Sutton, welcome to DreamPath Podcast.
Thanks, Brian. Nice to meet you. I love your guitar setup behind you. Right there.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I try to make it somewhat interesting in the background.
Sure.
But I watched The Last Son and a couple of other films of yours that really drew me into your world. And what a dark world that can be.
It can be. I mean, it certainly can be a dark lens, but I mean, look at the times. So
that's so true.
Yeah,
that's so true. And I did not have a chance to watch Dark Knight, but that was my intention. I'll probably watch it this weekend because I know the subject matter of the film and the concept of the film. And with this recent school shooting, I was like, I need to watch this. So
it's the never-ending conversation. It's the never-ending conversation and I made that movie in 2015, 2016. And while we were in the edit, three mass shootings happened just while we were editing the film, and it hasn't slowed down since. So it's a horrible conversation, but it's a conversation that needs to be had not only from the politicians and certainly from the news and journalism, but from art as well. And that's what I was trying to do with that film. So it doesn't really take sides. It's not a social issue documentary, but it's about how we live as much as how we die. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. I mean, just reading the subject matter of the film, it just really weighed heavily on me. I was like, "Whoa, man, it's such a prescient time to film something like that." But let's talk about The Last Son.
Sure.
So this was, I think, looking at your filmography, one of the first films that you directed that you did not write the screenplay for.
That's true.
So how did this come to you?
Let's see. In the heart of the pandemic, when the film industry was majoritively shut down, I got a script sent to me through Anonymous Content, which is my management company, from a producer named Jid Polhemus, who, has a major like action film kind of background. But this film, which was a blacklist script by a writer named Greg Johnson, just spoke to me. I mean, you talk about kind of the world being what it is, and kind of my cinematic viewpoint being a dark lens. The story just took me in right away. And it felt, even though I had never thought about doing a Western, and genre movies in general are not necessarily my first step, I just felt like I knew the territory. I knew the characters. I thought it was much about, a search and a search for answers and a search for meaning. And during the pandemic, that was what we were all going through. We were all trying to figure out like this search for meaning. Where do we fit in? Where is the world going? What is the meaning of family? What is the meaning of loss? And all of that. And the script really had it. And I loved working with Greg too. It took some pressure off not having to write it, having to come in and kind of then shape it as a director. Was a new kind of world for me, and totally enjoyable and very collaborative. And it was great to have these great bones of a story already in there. So then I could kind of visualize it in my own way.
It's interesting that it came to you in the pandemic and that you're looking at it more broadly, almost metaphorically, in terms of these concepts or these themes of loss and the meaning of family. Because the pandemic, for me, if I reframe this film, maybe Sam Worthington's character could be, this pending doom. Whether it's an illness that's going to get you somehow, sure, and it's just coming to get you, because he does have a almost a mystical quality to him that's not entirely human, because he almost seems immortal.
It's a really good way of putting it. When Sam and I talked about the character, when we were talking about it started with the kind of the concept of what the character wore, what his costume was, and we went through a lot of different ideas with Yvonne Reddy, the costume designer, and what I was looking for was this, what I called a dapper corpse, someone who had his own style, but had already passed over. Like to me, Sam Worthington's character is long past living. He's a ghost. He's a phantom. He's a plague.
Right.
And that's what gives him this otherworldly quality, is that it's not nihilism, because he's past caring. He's in the spirit. He's connected to the spirit world in a way, as much or more so than he is in the real world.
Mm-hmm. I see some parallels too with Frank Grillo's character in Donnybrook,
totally,
especially with that scene where in Donnybrook where Frank Grillo's pointing the gun at the deputy and what are you looking at? Looking at a dead man.
Yeah.
And the deputy looks back and says, "Me too." So you do have those parallels in those characters that are kind of half dead, and and for that reason, because they almost seem like they have nothing to lose. Right. Are that much more scary and ominous.
They are, because they're not, there's the jump scare type of fear, and then there's the fear of the true unknown, of not being able to know what this character is going to do next, but knowing it's going to be bad. Mm-hmm. Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men. Yeah. But even you go back to like a character like in Melville's Le Samurai, Alain Delon, he's this existentialism within the gangster, which makes the gangster kind of come alive to this new kind of dark poetry. Right. And I like characters I like building worlds as a filmmaker, and within those worlds, for certain characters, they're on their own plane. They march to their own drummer. They hear their own voices, and those voices are not right and wrong. They're almost beyond, and that's what allows them to do the most despicable of things, like track down your kids and kill them in the last song.
Right. Yeah, they have a narrative that's stuck in their head that is immovable, almost like a nightmare QAnon figure. I mean, it's like
Totally.
you can't argue that with Sam Worthington's character that his kids there's no such thing as a curse, or his kids are of course are never even going to give a shit about him if he just goes on and lives his life. But
Right. No, he's a believer in something that is beyond fact and fiction, you know.
yeah. The darkness of the previous film of your previous films is pretty striking compared to The Last Sun,
Mhm.
which seems to have a lot of natural light and beautiful landscape, outdoor settings. And I remember one striking scene with Machine Gun Kelly sitting in like wheatgrass or a prairie or something, and you just got all this lovely light in that film. So was that intentional, and how did you approach the cameras, the lenses, the lighting, and
Sure.
that shoot?
Well, I mean, the most important thing is you find the right cinematographer, and I was lucky enough to work with David Gallego, who's this amazing Colombian cinematographer. His previous work, Embrace of the Serpent, which was nominated for an Oscar, and Birds of Passage, are just both beautiful films, but deal with very dark, dark subject matter. But within, it's kind of a juxtaposition. It's like Scorsese playing a pop song while someone's getting their head beat in. And, it's the juxtaposition of light and dark.
Right.
One thing we really wanted to do is stay true to the genre. We wanted to make a movie that the ghost of John Ford would have watched and been like, all right, I recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
And that means looking at the landscape and feeling the landscape and understanding that the time of day matters, and that the sun turns into the moon and the moon turns into the sun, and to use that naturalism to our advantage to show the vastness of that world, but also to kind of contrast the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So when Emily Marie Palmer's character is by the river, it's the trickling water and the leaves in the yellow leaves in the trees, and the beauty of the sun hitting her face. But when it's Sam walking kind of across the prairie, it's hard. It's the sagebrush. It's like every step is almost like he's going to fall down and die. So there's we tried to take advantage of what that landscape was on both sides, on light and dark. As far as camera and lenses go, again, I'm not as technical a person, but what's important is that there isn't a lot of toys. There are only tools. You know what I mean? Like, you see a lot of movies or action films or genre films or even Westerns where you see a lot of mechanics of the filmmaking. You see lots of crane moves or like a more fanciful direction. And to me, it was about setting up a very, very simple, very elegant, very poetic language. But with that, you don't need a lot of lenses. You don't need, a lot of different bodies. We shot with one camera, not two cameras ever, and really tried to find what was important in every scene and shoot from that point of view and move forward. So to create a simple language that allowed the actors to become their characters, that allowed the landscape to just be as natural as possible.
Yeah, I see what you mean by the simplicity of it, or the minimalism of the shoot. Now that I look back on it, like the Gatling gun scene where Machine Gun Kelly's at the top of the hill and he's going to shoot down on the soldiers below.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been, I mean, I could see a director really overcomplicating that by, setting up angles, all kinds of angles, but you really had a simple view from below looking at the ominous situation that was about to happen, the view from the top, and then, the carnage, and then you're done.
Right.
But yeah, it's cool to hear your perspective on that.
I think minimalism is realism. And I do think, like, you see the gun from afar, you're about to get shot. Mm-hmm. And the only other angle you see is you're the gun shooting. It's like a first person shooter game. So you are complicit in being shot or shooting. And that's it. It's not a scene of lots of different angles, like you say, or lots of different setups. It is simply about life 1 minute and death the next minute.
Yeah. And not to give too much away, but there is a scene too between two key characters where there's a shocking end to one of their lives, and it happens very unceremoniously and without, if I remember correctly, no music, just a minimalist, matter of fact approach to life and death.
Right.
And I don't know. Have you ever read Ray Carver at all? Speaking of minimalism,
I love Raymond Carver, and yeah, exactly. Just the facts. You know what I mean? And or, not a lot of words, just the words that matter. You know what I mean?
Right.
One of my favorite writers is Tobias Wolff, who's a lot like Raymond Carver as well, and they both taught at Syracuse at the same time.
Right.
And it's there's poetry in but poetry achieved with the least amount of tools, with the least amount of words. And I listen, I think sometimes I write a little too flowery and too poetic, and I always try and kind of hone it down and hone it down and hone it down. And with the visuals, it's the same thing. Some of it is born out of necessity. I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of money. There's a certain amount of information I have to convey in this scene. But at the same time, that forces you to be economic in your choices and say, what is the essential thing I need from this scene? And what is the essential angle that will tell what I want to, the information I want to give to the audience? Nothing more, nothing less. And then move on. Nice.
I understand you're adapting a Tobias Wolff book into a movie. Is that right?
Yeah, I have adapted The Chain, which is a wonderful short story that I've just had in my back pocket for a long time. And that is with David Lancaster, who I did Donnybrook with. Just kind of, after Donnybrook came out, it was such a dark movie that The Chain is dark as well, but we're still in the process of trying to find a slightly different tone, not quite as nihilistic as what has come before. It's the same thing with The Last Son. The Last Son, yeah, on paper is a very dark movie, but as you pointed out, it's a beautiful movie. And it's also it's a genre movie. It stays true to the genre, and
it does.
It's as entertaining as anything else. It's not about doom and gloom. It is about it's a Western, and it's an epic, and it's also very intimate about people searching for themselves.
Yeah, I love Westerns. Unforgiven, I think, is my favorite.
I like Westerns too. I like The Misfits, even though it's not really a true Western. I do like Westerns, although I never thought for the life of me I was ever going to make one. It's very interesting how there's this kind of slew of there's this wave right now of Westerns, starting with like News of the World with Tom Hanks, and the Netflix just released that big Western with Idris Elba, and a movie called Old Henry that played at Venice. It seems like there's a little bit of a wave, which is bizarre that there's still interest, but I just never thought I'd get the chance. So when I did get the chance and the timing was right, it was like, all right, well, let's make it, like I said, let's make John Ford kind of proud, but stay true to what I think about things at the same time.
How did you approach firearm safety on set?
I mean, it was not the first time I'd used guns, but the first time that guns had played a constant part in the film. Our armorer was incredibly experienced. He not only had done numerous movies, but he is big in the reenactment world out in the Dakotas, Civil War reenactments, all that kind of stuff, which is a lot of gunplay. And so that we were really felt safe with him. It's a small film, and it's hard not to cut corners, but in the firearms, and the firearms in ours, they were always tested. The armor was always on, and we did not cut corners in that department. I mean, at one point I had to cut a day out of the shoot. Okay, got it, because we got snowed in, and I have to make choices like that. But I never felt like I was putting anyone in danger. because of the experience and because of the process. It's really scary what has happened. And I do feel like even though I had a good experience with my crew and my film, I'll never work with real firearms again.
Really?
I've made that pledge. I'll use fake guns. They can make fake guns. A lot of the stuff that that you experienced in The Last Sun, the actual shooting and the smoke and the fire are done in post. And
Really?
that technology is just going to get better. I like the way that the blanks worked in terms of giving it energy and really giving it purpose. But a movie is a movie, and lives are lives, and it's not worth the risk.
Yeah. Yeah. Smart move. That's just so tragic what happened in New Mexico.
Awful.
Where did you shoot?
We shot in Montana. We actually shot on the original Marlboro Ranch, where they shot the Marlboro Man photographs and commercials. This gorgeous piece of land not far from Livingston, Montana, which is really close to Yellowstone. Mm-hmm. But you look in each direction you look at is a different mountain range where we were. So it was just so gorgeous. And I live in New York. I live in Brooklyn. So to get out of my apartment and get out into the mountains for a couple of months during the pandemic was.
Oh yeah. Well, you guys were really locked down. I mean,
yes. Yeah. And that's why it worked. That's why it was safe. We were all staying on the ranch. Everyone who came to the ranch had to have a negative test. There was no vaccinations at the time. Obviously mask wearing was mandatory except for the actors. Yeah. But we were all kind of isolated together. We were all in quarantine together. And that's why it worked, I think.
Yeah. I want to talk about casting a little bit because Machine Gun Kelly took me by surprise, maybe because he's a musician who's transitioned into acting. But after seeing the film, I was like, wow, that is a very striking figure. I mean, movie star presence on camera. So what were your thoughts going in? Had you worked with Machine Gun Kelly before, and why him?
I hadn't worked with him before, although we've made another movie together that I'm getting close to final cut on that we've done since then. So I do like working with him. I think he's a star. I think he has presence. I think actors often, there are great actors, and then there are actors who think they're great. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of the times these guys who are musicians, they're used to performance. They're used to playing a role, even if they're playing themselves. They're used to the camera on them or eyes on them, and they know how to live in front of that setting. So he was definitely one of those people who, he's natural in front of the camera because he's used to it and has this innate skill to disregard the camera, to not think about the camera, to just live on screen.
Right.
It's also like the character's punk rock, and the cowboy is not just his character. Cal is not just a cowboy. He's punk rock. He's chaos. He's anarchy, and that's Machine Gun Kelly's persona. I mean, I think Coulson is also a very thoughtful, passionate, intelligent actor and just person in general. And so he's not just give me the gun, let me go out and do it. He really was searching for his father and searching for a way to survive at the same time.
And Sam Worthington, even though he is obviously a fantastic actor, he's more of a chameleon than a movie star. And I mean that in the absolute best way. Like if I had watched this film without looking at the cast beforehand, I would never know that was Sam Worthington.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, ever. He's just and it's not just because of the beard and the wardrobe. That guy is very hard to pin down and recognize for some reason. And I don't know if that's a talent or something you're born with, but what were you thinking with that casting choice?
Well, I came on after Sam was already cast, and I feel lucky in that case. We were both at Anonymous Content, so there was a good connection there. But I think I think Sam is one of those guys who could have been a huge movie star, but decided to be an actor instead. And I think he's very interested now in working with great actors, working with strong directors, and diving into roles rather than, listen, he got really famous doing Avatar, but he does Avatar because he wants to work with Jim Cameron and he wants to work on the cutting edge. And that is what Jim Cameron does constantly. He chooses roles because, okay, I get to act across from Harvey Keitel. Done. That's what I want to do. I can learn from him. And so he brings this kind of real thespian's viewpoint now.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes him so watchable and so interesting, is because he is the character. He is purely method. He is not in it just for the money. He is not in it for stardom. He is in it to find himself through the character. And, a lot of people say that, but you see in the movie, like Sam is doing that. He doesn't care if he's, if the first one shot out, for example. He doesn't care that his face he gets the close up first. He cares about the character's truth. And it was inspiring. And once you get that from your lead actor, everyone gets in line. Once they see Sam's commitment, everyone from the PAs to the other actors to the producers to the grips, everybody sees what he's doing and they're like, okay, I'm going to dig in.
Yeah. I better get my shit together because I don't want to look bad next to this guy.
Exactly. If he's going for it like this, then I can do my job,
I thought it was an interesting choice to have his voice crack and be so almost minimalist. I mean, meek and like he was, like you're saying, on the way out almost.
Yeah.
Went one foot in the grave, but he really had a voice that was shocking to hear in the first couple of scenes. Like you're listening going, what is he saying?
Yeah.
And that had to be a conscious choice that he made for his character.
That is absolutely a choice he made. The character was written a little bit more, just a little bit more archetypal in terms of like the bad guy, the villain. And I think Sam played it. He's not a villain. He's a ghost. The reason that he chose to do his voice like that was because here's a guy who goes around the prairie and the mountains, and he's been cursed for years and years and years. He's done some horrible things. He's on his own. He doesn't talk to people. He could go. I can imagine him going months without opening his mouth and saying anything to anyone. So that voice changes. The isolation changes you, and that's what Sam wanted to find with that.
Okay.
And I think it, to me, it's fascinating because, again, it's like he's not stepping closer to the audience. He's almost shying away from the audience, and I find that really interesting in the typical main the main bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's not in the forefront. He's in the corner. And that to me makes him even scarier. And his voice is a part of that.
Yeah. Was Heather Graham attached before you got involved?
Heather Graham was attached. She had made a movie with one of the producers beforehand. And I, again, felt super lucky just to work with her. I mean, she's worked with a couple of my favorite directors with Gus Van Sant and Paul Thomas Anderson. And she's the thing about Heather is that she's so committed to her character that, she kept off camera talking to me about Cal, about the character, about Cal. And she would just start crying in the middle of these conversations about just what her character feels for her, abandoning her son. And it was fascinating because it was really like we were talking about a real life person, like her real son, and she abandoned him and she'd be in tears, but we were just in her dressing room,
Mm-hmm.
So her commitment was surprising to me. But I loved working with her. I think she was great for the role. And she really, just like Sam did, she really pulled Coulson out. Like she really drew him out. So, when you get on set and Sam is doing what he's doing and Heather's doing what she's doing, it made Coulson realize like, oh, okay, like this isn't just an action film. Like I'm being pushed. and he likes that, and he rose to the occasion. But it was someone with the, kind of experience of Heather that was necessary for to do that.
I thought Thomas Jane did a great job too.
TJ's, yeah, he's a great actor.
Yeah, I looked at him. I was like, oh, another Sam Worthington moment where I'm looking at him going, I recognize him from something, and I realized it was Hung, which is like the most opposite role that you can have for what he was playing in this movie, but he did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, I think his character is, you have Sam against Coulson, and you have this kind of big thing, but really kind of the triangle in that is Solomon, is TJ's character. And I think it was hard because it had to be noble, but it had to be someone was carrying around this hurt, was carrying around this kind of secret history with Heather and with his own past. So it was, but also it had to push the two main characters' story even further rather than kind of drag away from it. And I think he does a really good job with it. And he's a wild man, like I liked working with him too. He's a very different actor from Sam Worthington, but one that you have to go for the ride, or he's going to just run wild,
So I'd like to talk about your screenwriting process, because after watching Funny Face, I watched that as well. I'm noticing a lot of space in your movies. Like, do you write that space in? How I'd look at, I have screenplays that, are in progress, and I always default to, action or dialogue. But you have some parts in films where, for instance, in Funny Face, where there's just long scenes where you're very comfortable with the pause, with the space of, two people just walking down the sidewalk. And if I was a filmmaker, I might be self-conscious about it. Like, is this too long? But it works, and it's powerful and compelling. But how do you approach that as a screenwriter? Because your screenplay has to be read by other people and be funded. And, so are you expecting the reader to see that space on the page and understand what it's going to do?
I think I am. Listen, Funny Face is a very different movie from Donnybrook, for example. But if you think about it, there are moments in both that are these long, kind of aggressively long takes, or passively long takes, if you will. I do write that in. I don't say, and they walk down the street for 5 minutes saying nothing, or they sit on a bench for nothing, but I'll talk about them sitting on the bench, not needing to talk. And a red flag flutters in the distance, and the sound of a kid down by the beach. And then he asks that, and then he looks at her and looks away. Like there are those moments that are baked in to kind of give this feeling of, really a feeling of authenticity. When you're on a bench at sunset with the girl that you kind of like, and you're having a snack together, and you're just sharing the space together, you want it to last forever. You want to take your time with it. And that's the natural thing. Or you're too nervous to say anything, At the same time, in Donnybrook, I think about the long take with Frank Grillo's character hitting, kind of beating on Margaret Qualley's character in the car. What I want from that is, if I cut, and the producers wanted me to cut at a certain point, but if I cut away or cut to a close-up or something, then you're no longer sitting in the car. You're no longer witness. So instead, that long take, you are sitting in the car and you are waiting and you are waiting, and it's not going to be good. And then he hits her, and you have to sit in the back seat of the car, and you have to wait, and he hits her again. And you're just like, what you're there. And if you make it a little bit smoother, a little bit easier, it takes away the impact. It might make it more uncomfortable, but it takes away the impact. I do write those in. I don't write them in so that they so that they disturb the financing, the idea of a financer reading the script and being like, wow, there's a real, I really get this story. It really moves. But anyone who's getting involved with me for the most part knows, that part of my cinematic language is the wondering about things, and is the poetry about things. And when you're walking, like when Sam is walking through the prairie after he's been in the fight with the Native American, it's a 4-minute shot, man. And I refuse to cut that because it's endless. He has to walk 4 minutes. He has to walk for days to get where he's going to get. And so at first you're like, wow, he's walking. And then you're like, wow, he's walking. The shot's going on a long time. And if you go long enough, then you stop thinking about the time and you're walking with him. And you're like, God, I'm exhausted. God, how is he making it? God, how is he? It becomes experiential, not just a viewing experience, but truly physically experiential. And I do put that in the screenplays. I try and convince collaborators of why it's important to do that. But at the same time, I try and make things accessible to the industry as well. So when they read it, they want to make it. Mm-hmm. Like Funny Face was made for less than $1 million. I knew nobody was going to, put $5 million into that. Yeah. I wanted to, but so that was made with less pressure to worry about what the financiers thought. They were on board.
Yeah, that scene with Frank and Margaret in the car, when I look back on it, it was completely immersive. And part of what made it so freaky or so scary and heavy was that you can hear the breathing. You can hear the sort of the rapid breathing and the kind of the muttering under his breath of whatever he's saying that maybe is not in the script. Yeah. And you've got just this very intense moment that almost seems like you're violating, you're a fly on the wall. In other words, like you're violating their privacy by being there, but you're forced to watch it. Right. But that's interesting that you're that intentional in your screenplays.
Absolutely.
It translates that way. I'd love to see one of your screenplays.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to share for sure.
Okay, cool. So I'd like to know, as an indie filmmaker, about the business currently, present day indie film in terms of financing. I know that 10% has to be added to the budget now for pandemic protocols and that type of thing. What are the challenges that you're facing today, getting funding and making the films that you want to make?
Well, I mean, I feel at this point pretty lucky. I've made 7 films, and they've all been appropriately budgeted. I wish I had more for some, and certainly, you have to make choices, but I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones. I do get financed. The issue is less in the financing, although financing is very difficult if you want to make challenging films or if you want to make original films, which is what I want to do and what I'm trying to do. It's what is the audience now for a film? You know what I mean? So the idea is you can make something like Funny Face. Funny Face I got made and I really wanted to make it. And everyone was like, oh, is it a Lovers on the Run movie? I was like, yeah. And they're like, is it a revenge film? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, it's kind of the New York genre. I'm like, yup. Like I made that because I'm interested in making specific kind of stories come alive. That movie, premiered at Berlin and then went away. It got a very, very tiny distribution deal. It did not play theatrically. It has really struggled to find an audience because the glut of content that's on Netflix, that's on all the streamers.
Right.
So it's very hard to find that audience. There are of course people who are interested in, they find it and they find a way to see things, but Netflix is spending billions of dollars on Netflix movies. There are a few Netflix movies that are good. Many Netflix movies are kind of seem like they're in the Netflix genre of you watch for about 20 minutes and then you look for something else on Netflix.
Scroll through Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think, and theatrically it's becoming, even harder. It was always hard, then it got harder. Then with the pandemic, it's become very, very difficult. So theatrically, you might get some screens, which is great, but it's really about, how do you make something original, but how do you get the streamers to take that original content, let it be original, and also promote it at the same time? I find that's the real issue with indie film right now. I think you can go out and you can make a film for 40 grand, or you can make a film for 40 million. There's money in both those areas if you're lucky and if you work hard. It's just a matter of like, how do you make something that finds an audience in a way that is meaningful?
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense, though, when you look at what how consumers consume content and what they're looking for. I think they're looking for very easy to digest, easy to understand categories of content. Like, this is a Western, this is a romance. I'm looking for, and that's the way Netflix breaks it down.
Yeah, it's a column. Genre. They're columns.
Yeah. And if your film doesn't neatly fit into those categories and is a little more challenging, as you say, I can see the problem with finding an audience, which is a shame, because I'm seeing some themes in your films that are really compelling. I mean, I think most of the characters that you write into screenplays and put onto screen are broken. They're very broken people. Mm-hmm. And those are the types of people that it's just like magnetic for me. I want to see where they're going. I want to see if there's a journey that results in them finding their way through that darkness.
Right.
And then you also, like in Funny Face, you have a confluence of characters that you would never expect to meet up and be involved with each other.
Right.
Like this young Muslim girl and or young woman, and then Cosmo Jarvis, who's he's a fascinating character in and of himself. I mean,
yeah, he's a spectacular actor.
Yeah, amazing work. So what is next for Tim Sutton? I noticed in your filmography there's a couple of upcoming projects. One I think you just mentioned about Machine Gun Kelly. It's already in the can and it's in post.
Yep. That's a movie I'm very excited about, and Coulson as well. That we shot in LA this summer, and it's about the last few days of a rock star's life. So it has a meta aspect to it that is kind of goes into this gray area of am I watching Machine Gun Kelly? Am I watching a fictional character? Am I watching both? And it's again, it's one of those movies that doesn't fall in the perfect columns, but is a very, very interesting movie about someone who in a way, how everything gets in the way of the creative process. All of the modern world, whether it's parenthood, whether it's technology, whether it's social media, whether it's the music industry, whether it's celebrity, whatever it is, all this person wants to do is make music and finish this album, but everything gets in the way. Addiction, all these different things get in the way of that creative process. That'll come out sometime, in 2022. We're looking for a premiere first to figure out where to premiere it, and of course finish the post-production process.
I think Cannes is still taking applications.
They are.
No pressure.
Yeah, no.
So The Chain, when do you start shooting on that?
The Chain is still in development. There's no plan for a shoot on that, and I'm currently writing two different projects. One is kind of influence. One is what I'm kind of pitching as my last dark movie for a long time. It's a little mix of movies like La Femme Nikita and Clockwork Orange about a very violent person who is cured of that violence, but then has to survive in a very violent world. Mm-hmm. And I'm also I'm in the process of optioning an article about phantom debt, about debt collectors who try and collect debts that don't exist through intimidation, and about how one person stands up to these debt collectors, and it's kind of a dark comic thriller. if you want to go in that direction.
Yeah, fascinating. So if you could tell my listeners where they can see The Last Sun and when.
Sure. The Last Sun comes out December 10th. It's playing a limited theatrical run, but it'll be on Apple TV immediately. And then it'll be on lots of different digital platforms on demand on December 10th.
Excellent. Well, I highly recommend that they go out and check out that film. It's a great genre film, but it also transcends the genre.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed our conversation.
Me too, Tim. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Sure. Take it easy.
Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with the handle @DreamPathPod. And as always, go find your dream path.